Once upon a time, there was a little girl who everyone called Little Red Riding Hood. She was known far and wide for her bright red hooded cloak, which she wore every day without fail. Can you guess why? That's right, because she always wore a red hood. It was a gift from her grandmother, and she cherished it dearly. One sunny morning, Little Red Riding Hood's mommy called her over. The sun was shining brightly, and the birds were singing sweetly outside their cozy little home. "Sweetheart," her mother said with a warm smile, "would you take this basket of goodies to Grandma's house? She hasn't been feeling well, and I'm sure this will cheer her up." Little Red Riding Hood loved her grandma very much. She always looked forward to visiting her, as Grandma always had the best stories and the warmest hugs. She grabbed her little basket, gave her mommy a big kiss on the cheek, and skipped out the door with a heart full of joy and excitement. The basket was filled with delicious cookies, a pot of golden honey, and a beautiful bouquet of fresh flowers. Each item was carefully chosen to bring a smile to Grandma's face. Little Red Riding Hood was excited to see her grandma and make her feel better. She imagined the look of delight on Grandma's face when she saw the goodies. As she skipped along the forest path, Little Red Riding Hood smiled at the sunshine peeking through the trees. The forest was alive with the sounds of nature, and it filled her with a sense of wonder. The birds sang her a happy tune, and the squirrels chattered hello. It seemed as though the entire forest was greeting her with open arms. It was a beautiful day for a walk in the woods. The path was lined with wildflowers, and the air was filled with their sweet fragrance. Little Red Riding Hood felt like she was in a magical world, where everything was perfect and nothing could go wrong. The path to Grandma's house led through the woods. Little Red Riding Hood skipped happily along, humming a little tune. The trees were tall and green, and the sunlight made pretty patterns on the ground. She imagined her grandma's happy face when she saw the treats. Grandma loved cookies, especially the ones with little chocolate chips that Little Red Riding Hood helped bake. She hoped the flowers would cheer her grandma up too. As she went deeper into the woods, the trees grew taller and closer together. The sunlight wasn't as bright anymore, but Little Red Riding Hood wasn't scared. She knew the way to Grandma's house very well. Suddenly, Little Red Riding Hood stopped. She saw a big furry wolf peeking out from behind a tree. He had sharp teeth and a long, bushy tail. Little Red Riding Hood was a little frightened, but she remembered her manners. "Good morning, Mr. Wolf," she said politely. The wolf was surprised. He was expecting Little Red Riding Hood to be scared, but she was so kind, he decided to trick her. "Well, hello there, Little Red Riding Hood. What a lovely basket you have. Where are you going on this fine day?" he asked, trying to sound friendly. "I'm going to see my grandma," Little Red Riding Hood said with a bright smile on her face. She was excited because she loved visiting her grandma, who always had the best stories and the warmest hugs. "She lives in the little cottage at the end of the path with the pretty red door. It's my favorite place in the whole world," she added, thinking about the cozy little house surrounded by tall trees and colorful flowers. She held up her basket proudly, showing off the goodies she had prepared. "See, I brought her some cookies, honey, and flowers. Grandma loves these treats, and I picked the flowers myself from the meadow nearby." The wolf smiled slyly to himself, his eyes gleaming with a cunning plan. He had been waiting for an opportunity like this. "What a good granddaughter you are," he said, trying to sound as friendly as possible. He knew he had to gain her trust. "Why don't we have a race?" he suggested, his voice dripping with false enthusiasm. "You take the path and I'll take the shortcut." He pointed to the fork in the road, knowing that his shortcut would give him the advantage. "Let's see who gets to Grandma's house first," he challenged, his heart racing with excitement at the thought of his plan working. Little Red Riding Hood thought that sounded like fun. She loved to race. Her eyes sparkled with excitement as she imagined the thrill of running through the forest. "Okay, Mr. Wolf," she giggled, her laughter echoing through the trees. She was confident she could win. And off she skipped down the path, her red cloak fluttering behind her like a bright flag. The wolf watched her go, a sly grin spreading across his face. He knew he had the upper hand. then ran quickly in the other direction, his paws barely making a sound on the forest floor. He knew a secret shortcut to Grandma's house. It was a hidden trail that only he knew about, winding through the thickest part of the forest. He was sure he would get there first and surprise Little Red Riding Hood and her grandma. Section 5. Something's not quite right. The wolf reached Grandma's house first. He knocked softly on the door. "Who's there?" called Grandma's weak voice. "It's me, Grandma, Little Red Riding Hood," the wolf said, trying to sound sweet. Grandma was too sick to realize it wasn't Little Red Riding Hood's voice. She opened the door a crack. The wolf pushed his way in and gobbled her up in one gulp. He was a very naughty wolf. Then he put on Grandma's nightgown and bonnet and hopped into bed, pulling the covers up to his chin. He waited for Little Red Riding Hood to arrive. Section 6. Big Eyes and Big Ears. Soon, Little Red Riding Hood arrived at Grandma's house. She had been walking through the forest, enjoying the sights and sounds of nature, and now she was finally here. She knocked on the door, her little heart beating with excitement. She couldn't wait to see her dear Grandma. "Grandma, it's me, Little Red Riding Hood," she said, her voice filled with joy and anticipation. "Come in, dear," the wolf said in a croaky voice. He had been waiting for this moment, his plan almost complete. He tried to sound like Grandma, but he wasn't very good at it. His voice was rough and unconvincing, but Little Red Riding Hood didn't notice. Little Red Riding Hood went inside and saw her grandma in bed with her bonnet on. "Oh, Grandma," she said, "you look different today." She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but something seemed off. "Your eyes are so big," she exclaimed, taking a step closer to the bed. "That's because I'm so happy to see you, dear," croaked the wolf, trying to hide his grin. He was pleased that his disguise was working. "And Grandma," Little Red Riding Hood said, her curiosity growing. She had more questions. "Your ears are so big," she observed, wondering why they looked so different. "That's because I'm listening to you, sweetheart," the wolf said, his voice dripping with false sweetness. He leaned in closer, eager to continue the charade. Little Red Riding Hood was puzzled. She had never seen her grandma look like this before. She wondered if something was wrong. "And Grandma," she said hesitantly, "your teeth are so big and sharp." She was starting to feel uneasy. "All the better to eat you with, my dear," the wolf growled, revealing his true nature. Little Red Riding Hood gasped in horror as she realized the danger she was in. She turned and ran as fast as she could, her heart pounding in her chest. She had to find help before it was too late. Just then, a woodsman who had been nearby heard her cries and rushed to her aid. He burst into the cottage, ready to confront the wolf. With a swift swing of his axe, the woodsman chased the wolf away, saving Little Red Riding Hood and her grandma. They were safe at last. Little Red Riding Hood hugged her grandma tightly, grateful for the woodsman's bravery. She had learned a valuable lesson about being cautious and always staying alert. And so they lived happily ever after, always remembering the day they outsmarted the big bad wolf. Section 7. A Worried Little Red. Little Red Riding Hood took a step closer to the bed. She was starting to feel a bit worried. "But Grandma," she said, "your hands are so big and hairy." "That's because I'm going to give you a big hug," the wolf cried. He couldn't wait any longer. He jumped out of bed, opening his mouth wide. Little Red Riding Hood screamed. She had never seen anything so scary. The wolf was just about to gobble her up when... Section 8. A Familiar Sound. Crash! The front door burst open and in came a kind woodcutter with his sharp axe. He had been chopping wood nearby when he heard Little Red Riding Hood scream. The woodcutter saw the big bad wolf and knew exactly what was going on. He raised his axe high above his head and chased the wolf out of the house and far, far away into the woods. The wolf was so scared that he promised never to bother anyone again. Section 9. A Happy Reunion. The woodcutter rushed over to Little Red Riding Hood. "Are you all right?" he asked. Little Red Riding Hood threw her arms around the woodcutter. "Oh, I'm so glad you came," she cried. "The wolf ate Grandma." The woodcutter looked around the room. He noticed the wolf's big tummy. He had an idea. He carefully cut open the wolf's tummy with his axe, and guess what? Out popped Grandma, safe and sound. Section 10. A Lesson Learned. Little Red Riding Hood and her grandma were so happy to be reunited. They thanked the woodcutter for being so brave. Grandma gave Little Red Riding Hood a big hug and told her, "Never talk to strangers, especially if they look like they want to eat you." Little Red Riding Hood learned a valuable lesson that day. She realized that it's important to listen to your parents and to be careful when talking to strangers. They all enjoyed the delicious treats Little Red Riding Hood brought, and Grandma felt much better thanks to her granddaughter's love and care. Section 11. Sweet Dreams. The woodcutter left, whistling a happy tune. Grandma tucked Little Red Riding Hood into bed, and Little Red Riding Hood told her all about her adventure in the woods. Soon she was fast asleep, dreaming of butterflies and sunshine. And you know what? The big bad wolf was never seen in those woods again. The end.